There is cause for celebration as today marks the 200th episode of the Singing Teachers Talk podcast. A huge thank you to every single guest who has gifted us their time, expertise and experience. And of course, the biggest thank you to every single listener who has tuned in and spent some time with us. We hope this podcast has brought you knowledge, curiosity, comfort, and a little bit of a giggle here and there. What better way to celebrate our 200th episode than with a topic that is a little bit divisive and, let's be frank, quite confusing at times. Mix and belt. And who better to bring on board than someone who has played Bee in Something Rotten, Elsa in Frozen, and a little known role called Elphaba in Wicked. We are thrilled to introduce Emily Kristen Morris to the podcast and to celebrate this very special milestone episode. Emily, when did you first recognise that you could sing? And if we're being honest, that your voice is carved by like 1,000 angels or sipping champagne and made from unicorn tears. It's pretty great. It's pretty great.
Alexa, don't make me blush. Well, first, I just want to say, thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. So excited to nerd out about the voice today. I didn't know as early as some people might have. I don't come from I come from a family that certainly supports the arts, but I don't really have any singers in my family. And yeah, my parents are architects. They saw that I liked to sing a lot as a kid. I did my first children's musical at age 11, and that is when I knew pretty much right away that not even that I wanted to be a singer, that I wanted to be, a performer and that I wanted to do musical theater. But yeah, certainly had been singing up until then, but didn't know until then.
And so considering your training and your career so far, what would you consider to be your own vocal challenges that you've had to navigate and maybe still navigate, which we just don't know about?
Sure. Gosh, I mean, I do hope that with my, social media content and presence that people do see that even the professional singers who you might put on a pedestal as having perfect, vocal function and vocal technique are also still working on their voice and still working out the kinks and issues that come with performing 8 shows a week and that come with singing professionally. So yeah, of course, I'm very actively still working on my voice and have been a student of the voice since I, decided I wanted to do this at age 11 or whatever. I started off as one of those kids who just wanted to scream, right? I was just pulling chest for my life, pulling up chest, first passaggio and all that. And I loved it. And I loved being loud and taking up space and all that. And then very quickly, I started voice lessons with a fabulous teacher in San Francisco who basically said, you have to start reckoning with what is above your break. So then, we started working on head voice and then eventually started working on mix. And so for the first, bit of my singing journey, really it was developing what was on the other end of first passaggio and developing a mix, developing a blend. And I would say to this day, mixing and coordinating around the first passage is still something I work towards every day. I think what's so interesting about the voice is that everybody has different sort of Achilles heels and everybody has different tendencies that they tend to fall back on when they're tired or when they're not kicking into gear technically. And so anyway, I think still to this day, my voice lessons where I'm not teaching, where I'm taking with teachers usually focuses on connection stuff. And then, of course, just rep and building roles and all the things that you get asked to do if you're working professionally.
When did you discover the word mix?
I would say probably earlier than many in their vocal development. My first teacher was definitely a teacher of mixed voice. His name was Richard Nicole. He's passed now, but he was like a Broadway guy who also had a background in opera. So he'd done a bunch of operas. He'd done Valjean and Les Mis on the tour in the 80s. Or maybe 90s, I guess 90s. And he'd done, what's that singer cat in Cats? Anyway, he did all the big epic musical theater of the 80s and 90s. So he had that opera background and musical theater background. And he was very in tune with the fact that everyone needs to learn how to mix. Because in our field, I would argue in really any. Yes.
Absolutely go and check them out. They are so easy to understand. You give some really great demos. And it is really nice to see somebody who is out there auditioning professionally and getting professional roles, seeing what that process is actually like and how you're continuing to work on your voice. So, yeah, definitely check that out, people, if you haven't yet. You have played roles like Elsa in Frozen. You've just actually returned from Arendelle, I believe, from
Yeah, yeah.
Chicago, which probably felt just as cold.
Oh, colder, colder. Yeah.
You've played Elphaba, you've played Bee in Something Rotten. Can you give us an insight to what it's actually like playing a role like Elphaba, which is pretty belty, it's pretty intense, and it's 8 shows a week?
Yeah. Well, okay, to be fair, I never did it 8 shows a week because I was standing by. And I do think, just from talking to, there's this whole network of people who've played Elphaba, and we all end up getting to know each other. And from talking to other Elphabas, I just think it is a really different thing doing it 8 shows a week versus standing by in so many ways. But yeah, it's a game of stamina. It's a huge game of stamina. As somebody who studies the voice, I do think that even since Wicked opened, we're talking about mixing and belting differently than we did back then. And it does mean that Elphabas are getting injured a lot less now. We know more, and therefore we can be smarter about, how do we handle just how high velocity of a sing that role is. And yeah, I mean, I know you said you wanted to get into like mix and belt and what are these definitions, what do they even mean, so we should get into all of that. But I do think in general we're just, as an industry, we are embracing the idea of mix belting in a way that we weren't in the early 2000s, and thank God, because it means that roles like Elphaba are a lot more possible.
So then tell us, Emily, what do you think belting, mix belt, mix, what do they all mean to you? And this is a topic that is really a bit divisive, like
Yes.
having pineapple on a pizza.
Yes. Yes, which I don't like, by the way.
Really? Okay, I'm on the other camp. I'm all for it.
Good for you. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I mean, look, it is divisive. And I will say that there are lots of different vocal methodologies and pedagogues out there. I am just one voice, so take it with a grain of salt. And I will also say my perspective comes from my history with the voice is certainly with voice teaching, is I'm certified through the Institute for Vocal Advancement. This is how we have come to understand the voice there. Okay, mix versus belt versus mix belt. Let's talk about it. Okay, let's start with mix. So chest voice and head voice are registers, right? Registers of the voice. Some people categorize mix as a register. I think there's some argument to that. I think it's more helpful to think of mix, though, as like a coordination, right? Ultimately, I think it's getting the TA and the CT muscle to work together, these muscles that are responsible for our voice. But mainly, the old-timey approach is, for people listening, I know you know this, Alexa, TA is what we think of as chest-dominant sounds, and CT is more of head-dominant sounds. And getting these two muscles to work together means that you are probably mixing, right? And so it's getting these muscles to work together to blend your chest and head voice registers so that particularly at the first passage, so that mixing enables you to sing from low to high with no gaps or flips or breaks, right? So mix it's a coordination. It can also be a style. Some people think of mixing as a style. Some people think of mixing as a register. That's all fair game, I think. This is why it gets so confusing. But at the end of the day, I think of mix as a coordination. It is something that the voice learns how to do over time. So then belt is also not a register. And when we start thinking of belting as a register, like I got my chest voice and I got my head voice and I got my belt, that is when we get problems, right? I actually have this list that I can go down, and I talk about this in masterclasses and things, but there are these like common belting misconceptions, right? And then we have the truth of the matter. So, okay, misconception number 1, belting is a register of the voice. Like we talked about, I believe belting is a style, not a register. And I guess I should just say, first and foremost, my sort of definition of belting is a powerful chest dominant style of singing in non-classical music. Misconception number 2, belting is synonymous with chest voice. So I would say, certainly in our industry in musical theater, like up until, I don't know, the 90s, 2000s, we were talking about belting as if it was chest voice. We were thinking about Ethel Merman and, these women who sort of belted up to a C and that was it. And they didn't go above their first passage. And, for a long time in musical theater, writers were writing that way as well. We wouldn't ask any female identifying voice to belt above a C because that's the first passage. But then you start getting things like Evita, and you get Aida, and you get Rent, and you get, pop musicals and rock musicals and Wicked. And then all of a sudden, what do? We're telling women to belt, and men, to belt above their first passage. So we can't call belting chest voice anymore. Belting is not synonymous with chest voice. Belting is chest dominant, but it is not chest exclusive. And that's where mixed belting comes in, right? Okay, I'm giving you my whole dissertation. Number 3, belting, this misconception of, belting is pulling chest above the first passage. Well, now we know the truth is healthy belting requires some connection to mix at the first passage, yeah? Misconception number 4, if you are in chest voice, you are belting. I feel like sometimes I have singers come to me who really believe that, and it's like, oh, wait. You can be in chest without it being a belt, right? That's my chest voice. Is that a belt? No. Maybe that's a belt, right? Again, it's a style. It's a powerful style that I'm putting onto my chest voice. So yes, belting requires a strong foundation of chest, but just because you're in your chest voice doesn't mean it's a belt, right? Final 2 misconceptions. So, okay, the higher the note, the more dangerous. I think that was a misconception for a long time, maybe still is. But now we know the truth of the matter is the higher the belted note, just the more mix needs to be incorporated. Doesn't make it more dangerous. Of course it would if our definition was pulling chest voice, but that's not our definition. And then finally, misconception, belting will cause vocal damage. I was told that growing up by musical directors as a kid. And of course we know the truth of the matter is healthy belting is possible. People do it 8 shows a week. People do it on stages across the world and in concert venues. And I think it just can't be true, right? That belting just will injure you. Because if that was true, how would we be asking so many different genres of singers to do it, and do it, and people do it so well. So yeah, all this to say, it's a style. It's not a register. It's something that you can put on your chest voice or your mix. It just needs to be chest dominant and it needs to be powerful. And that's kind of it. That's my definition of belt. Okay, I'm gonna keep going because we're in it. So now mixed belt. So mixed belt means basically as we said, belting style, but on a mix coordination. So it's not just chest voice. Now it's, within your mix, putting a belt styling onto that. So powerful, chest dominant, but not chest exclusive, mixed belt. We just went so deep, so fast, Alexa.
That's how we roll. You alluded in your story about your technical journey that you were an M1 chest dominant, thick fold, whatever you want to call it, singer, dragging up, and that your teacher mentioned, you've got to work on what's beyond that to help balance this out. So in your view, what do you think a singer needs to have established before a good reliable belt and a mix coordination can be effective and accessible?
Well, 2 different things. Before we, start talking about belt, let's build a mix. I think that's in my school of thought, really my goal for every singer that I work with is connection and balance first and foremost, right? So connection meaning there's no gaps or flips or breaks. You can smoothly transition from the bottom to the top. And then balance meaning that no part of the voice has to feel either more squeezed or more breathy than another part, right? And so how are we going to get that? We got to learn how to mix, yeah? So first and foremost, if we're trying to build a mix, we do, in fact, need access to chest voice and head voice. Yeah, I had a teacher say you can't find purple until you have blue and red. If someone is, like you said, just sort of living in M1, living in a strong chest voice and, not much above it, building a mix is going to be kind of futile because we don't have anything to like build that bridge to. There's no island on the other side. We need chest and head. Then we can start building the bridge between them. And same thing is true for somebody who like lives in head voice and doesn't ever really come down to a true chest voice. We got to build chest. So that's sort of the first step. And then when it comes to building a belt, it just means leaning into chest dominance and sort of teaching students how to do that, whether it be in their chest voice or their mix or whatever. But I think first and foremost goal is how do we build connection and how do we build a mix?
How do you help a singer to understand what that's going to require in terms of building a connection? What are we going to have to do with the chest and the head in order to marry it together?
Yeah. I mean, technically speaking, we're going to put you right on your break and do exercises in and out and in and out, requiring you to sort of seesaw between chest and head so that you can start building that coordination of like, what is it to sort of hand off weight between these two things? And then eventually, what is it to sort of gradually thin out so that it's not all or nothing. It's not, you know what I mean? You see a lot of those twangy, ugly, bratty sounds. All those things are great. We don't want them forever, but they're a great place to start. Calling exercises is something a lot of people do. There are sort of like go-to best practices exercises for building a mix. But the biggest thing is you got to place yourself right above your first passage and then require yourself to go in and out of that place. Which, by the way, every song is going to make you do anyway. Certainly that's true of most musical theater, if we're speaking about that.
When it comes to the male singer, who arguably, unless you're playing somebody like Orpheus in Hadestown or someone who is going into a little bit of a flip or a head voice plays, they're arguably a little bit more chest dominant in their repertoire anyway. But tenor stuff is getting higher and higher as things get written. How did they work on a transitional point when they're not necessarily in and out of like where we might be as female presenting voices?
Right. Yeah. Soprano, alto, mezzo, female presenting voices just have to reckon with their break more because a bigger percentage of our range is head voice. That being said, I would totally say that you're right. Like in musical theater, in pop singing, men are being asked to sing higher and higher and higher. And, for my money, like most things live in and above first passage for men as well in musical theater these days. So they're having to reckon with it too. Of course, if you just want to sort of sit with singing Frank Sinatra songs for the rest of your life, you'll be fine, I guess. But if you're working on contemporary stuff, it's the same. You're going to have to reckon with it. I think sometimes people feel like, well, it must just be a completely different thing, sort of building a mix for a male voice versus a female voice. And I really don't think it is. It's exactly the same. It's, again, putting you on exercises that force you to reckon with what's happening at the first and second passage. And even though for men, not as much of their material might require that of them, some will, so you might as well work on it,
Yeah. And I really love what Amanda Flynn talks about. We've had her on the podcast before, and she also did a really great presentation on belt and mix for the Voice Study Centre. And she was describing about how all singing, no matter what you're doing, has to get lighter as it ascends. I think it's that perception that belt is big and strong, so it must have to be chest, like you were talking about before. We've got this label of it of being a chest exclusive thing. Amanda also spoke of a study where professional singers who belted were asked to describe the sensation of that for themselves and how that felt ascending through the range. And the general consensus seemed to be that singers felt a gradual transition from the lower, heavier belt to a higher, lighter belt, specific turning point from the lower, heavier belt to the higher, lighter belt that has been smoothed out over time, a change in placement or resonance as the belt goes higher, namely a higher resonance, and a narrowing or thinning as the belt goes higher.
Right.
They didn't necessarily say it felt like a flip. It still felt connected. So do you resonate with that description? How would you describe your own experience of kind of shifting through the range?
Totally. I completely resonate with that. But I will say that is, the definition of professional singers talking about it. If you're a 14-year-old listening to this podcast and you're like, I do not feel a gradual transition, it is pretty abrupt for me, that's normal. This definition is for singers who have been working on this for years, because yes, that is how I feel it in my voice for sure. It's a gradual thinning out. And that's the goal. I would say that is the goal for every singer, so that, yeah, you're not dealing with huge pops or flips or breaks as you're approaching each passaggio. But that takes time and that takes coordination, and that doesn't come naturally necessarily. So yes, that is how I feel it. And that's how I try to get my singers to feel it. But if you don't feel that way and you're listening to this podcast, that's very normal. And if you have an abrupt flip, then okay, the next step is, can we get you to a gradual flip? Once we get you to a gradual flip, can we get you to no flip at all? It's like there are steps towards these goals. And if you don't feel that way, then that's okay.
This might be a nice time to be really cheeky and ask if you have a phrase that you could demo for us where we can actually hear what a mix sounds like. What are we aiming for?
So even if I were to just put myself on this octave and a half scale, which is like a huge chunk of your voice, you're going to have to reckon with some passaggio at some point. For me, I'm going to be going right through my first in this key. If I were to, even just put this on an M, just like a hum, I could certainly just like let a flip happen at first passage, which used to probably be the only thing I could do as a kid learning about her voice. So that might sound like this. We hear a big shift in quality. It's pretty abrupt, right? And so now, these days, when I'm feeling good, I'm able to do that without a flip. And maybe you hear gradual shifts, and that's totally fine, but it's gradual, not abrupt. And that's the goal. And then that's applicable to all the song work you do. So then if we were going to like do some song application, I was working with a student yesterday on In My Dreams from Anastasia, which is like, wow, what a definition of a song that requires a great mix. It sits right in the first passage, that after the bridge, that in my dreams it's A, C, B. So right in the middle. So, I could just pull chest. In my dreams. Okay, it's fine. Is it right for the style of this song? Again, we can think of these things as sort of stylistic choices too. Probably not. This is, more of like a princess sound. She's really young. It's a really vulnerable moment in the song. So we probably want more of like a mix quality. But if we don't have access to a mix and we don't want it to be all chest, then our only option is to flip. In my dreams. So again, we can either pull chest or we can flip. What's the middle ground? Well, it's mixing. In my dreams, it's so real, and my heart has so much to reveal. I'm accessing chest voice. I'm accessing head voice. I am finding a coordination that is somewhere between the two, right? And that's my mix.
And I'm just over here just fucking floored. It's just so lovely.
Thanks, Alexa.
So in that sound that you were making there, if you were helping somebody to lean into something that was a little bit more influenced by a thickness, how do you help them do that? If they've got these two ends established, how do you help them to go, okay, lean a little bit more into chest or lean a little bit more into head?
Yeah, well, it all just depends on what your goal is. If it's leaning more head dominant, we're going to do more closed vowels. We're probably going to do more back vowels. If we want to lean more chest dominant, we're going to do more open vowels and front vowels, right? Like this is sort of like teaching 101. And I think, how do I say this? There's no like prerequisite to becoming a voice teacher. Anybody can call themselves a voice teacher and start, teaching, which is all fair and good. But then I think this is the sort of education that you need then in moments like, well, how do you teach a singer to do X, Y, and Z? If the only thing you know is what works in your voice, that doesn't go very far because everybody's voice is different. But we do know scientifically, right, that Closed vowels lean head dominant, open vowels lean chest dominant, front vowels are going to lean, So anyway, I certainly rely on all the things that I know about the voice to help a student with whatever that goal may be.
I'm just pressing the pause button on the podcast for a very brief moment to invite you to book your free BAST call. If you've been thinking about joining the BAST community through one of our courses, but you just don't know which option is the best for you, then why not book your free Zoom chat with our very own Kimberly George, who has all the answers. Head over to basttraining.com/book-a-call/ and click that big blue button. That's basttraining.com/book-a-call/. Now, where were we?
Your voice is well equipped to do what it just did there. I mean, in another life, I would very much enjoy your larynx to be my larynx. But it kind of reminds me of something that came up on Besfoot Williams's Instagram. He's a singing teacher here. He's a rehab coach here. And he was talking in the UK, that is, not in my house. He was saying that getting an Ariana Grande larynx to try and make an Ethel Merman sound while belting is irresponsible. So how do you help a singer to find the belt that is theirs, true to their body, their physiology, their intentions, their equipment, while still satisfying the expectation of that musical style?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would argue that both of those two women are belting, right? It's just you're right. They're really different larynxes. They're different bodies. Ariana Grande is tiny, and I'm sure that her vocal cords are smaller than Ethel Merman's were. So yes, every singer is different. Is that to say, though, that one can belt and one can't, or one can learn to mix and one can't? Absolutely not. I mean, I love that. I love what he said, and I totally agree with it. But I still believe that, Ariana Grande's version of belt is just as marketable and usable. And that's a belt, just like Ethel Merman's was a belt. Do they sound pretty different? Yeah. Are they both belting? Yeah.
For a singer who seemingly overweights the sound, like little 11-year-old Emily, who you said at the beginning was a bit of a chest dragger, in order for them to be able to ascend with an essence of lightness, what's one of your favorite things to do to encourage a bit of that let go?
Yeah. Okay. So for we call them at IVA issue in the top, aka sort of weighty singers, people who want to pull up weight. We're going to go towards more closed vowels. I love a wee, wee, wee. The other thing that's nice, that's a nice thing to do for those type of singers is put them on exercises that are top down instead of bottom up. Because when you go bottom up, the tendency is just to pull weight. So if I were to do wee, 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 if my tendency is to do wee, 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 sort of pulling up weight, what if I put them above the break, require them to thin out immediately, and then come down? Wee, 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 wee. I like exercises that go down for those types of singers. It just helps people thin out immediately, and then you can approach your chest voice as you're coming down. Yeah.
And how do you help them to kind of reinvite chest back without that big
There might be that big and so now it's time to do that over and over and over again until we start finding that coordination. Yeah,
bit of repetition.
Yeah, because anybody who just wants to hold on to one register, whether it be chest or head, is never going to build a mix. You have to start getting comfortable with reckoning with it. And if that means a big, flip for now, that's cool. Let's practice that flip until it feels less, flippy.
And I know we say repetition is key. It's helping us to build the pathway in the brain, a new pathway that isn't dragging. It's probably a question of how long is a piece of string, but how much in that lesson are you getting them to repeat that particular exercise? Are you like, right, we're going to hit it 10 times. We're going to do it for a little bit of 5 minutes, and then we'll do it again 20 minutes in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in an average hour-long lesson, maybe the first 5 minutes is true warm-ups. So that's just semi-occluded vocal tract exercises just to get the voice warm. And then the next 20 minutes is like vocal exercising. So, conditioning and working towards whatever vocal goal that singer is working through. And then, applying that to song and seeing if you can do what you were doing so well in exercises in a song. Yeah, 20 minutes or so. But then if you're doing a 30-minute lesson, maybe it's only 15 or 10.
Do you ever find singers who are just shoving a frig load of air at the belt and it feels too overpressurized?
Totally. Yeah.
How do you help kind of like release the pressure on that?
Well, something that we have to sort of reckon with is that you actually don't need that much air for belting. You need a whole lot more air for like some lyric soprano song than you do for a belt piece, because ultimately the chords are coming together pretty firmly in a belt. It's chest dominant. If you take too much air in, then you're going to get a ton of back pressure and it's going to get squeezy. Of course, if you let too much air out, then it's also not good. We don't want that. But it's finding that nice balance between air and muscle. How much are you resisting the airflow? How much air did you take in the first place? You actually might not need as much as you think you do when you're belting.
So something I've liked recently, which is really nice and playful, is the bubble wands that you would have as a kid where you just put the stick in and then blow the bubbles.
Yes.
We've experimented with like just blowing air through the bubble wand and creating, awesome bubbles in the room. And then using that to then sing on. And some people have just found it as like a little pressure release because there's so much subglottic pressure or so much air backed up that it's valving out the airflow, because again, we may think, right, there's no airflow in belt, but actually there's got to be some to help that release.
Sure.
So how would you help somebody to find a little bit more flow when they're a bit stuck?
More airflow? I mean, the bubble wand just reminds me of doing straw work, right? Like, I feel like that's really connected, because straw work definitely immediately just sort of forces you to figure out a better coordination between muscle and air. Yeah, I guess that could be my answer. I love straw work for people who are overcompressed.
Conversely, if you're working with somebody who is not really engaging chest, which might be a really shy personality even, or somebody who has been singing classically and they're not used to the M1 dominant space, how do you get them to bring that on board?
Yeah, I love like spoken quality exercises, because more often than not, and sometimes you get an outlier and that's tricky, but more often than not, even the most sort of like what we call light chest singer probably still speaks in chest voice. Every once in a while you meet someone who speaks here and then, oh man, okay, we can't connect it to speaking then because that's not how they speak. But more often than not, you can say to that person, hey, what you just did in that vocal exercise didn't sound very, very connected to what your voice sounds like when you're speaking to me. And I can assure you that version of your voice when you speak is very usable in your singing. So yeah, I'll do a lot of spoken quality exercises, a lot of calling, but I love like a 5-tone ah. Okay. I love just a ah, 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 ah. I think it's just about the ugliest, most open vowel possible. It usually gets people pretty quickly to sort of navigate just like a raw chest voice down at the bottom of their range. And then, then you add a consonant. Maybe you add an N, na, 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 na. Then you start doing bigger scales. I like starting with an ah or an That can be nice too. Along with like, spoken quality stuff.
So when you've got a singer who isn't really particularly draggy and they're not really too heady either, they've got a nice balance in there, what would you go to in like your toolbox to carry on that connection over and just maybe elevate it, confirm it, stabilize it?
Yeah. So if somebody has access to a really nice chest voice and head voice, then the next step is building connection. And we sort of talked about this, but basically I'm going to put you right on your first passage and ask you to seesaw back and forth over and over again. I'm sure you've talked about this with other teachers on your podcast. Certainly one of the sort of go-to tools for a lot of teachers when building a mix is using sort of that uglier, brattier, twangy, whatever word you use, sound, and then hopefully taking it away because we don't want to stay there forever. Even like a creaky M, we did that before, like a really creaky M with a little bit of creakiness, and that can open up to like a may, you know, and I think there are so many consonants and vowels that you can do, but the bottom line is once you find that connection with the tool of a bratty, ugly sound, immediately the next step is take it away because you don't need to live there forever. So if I'm seeing someone who's building really nice connection on their first passage, sure, let's put it on a may, fine. That is not the only one we could do, but yeah, so if they started may, and then we've built them to may, but it's bratty and it's ugly. Okay, now give me like 50% less of that brattiness. May. You know, and you start taking it away so that eventually you can find a more finished quality sound. But basically, you know, the idea with twang, the idea with going pharyngeal, that's the term I use, going more bratty, going more ugly. It's just helping the chords sort of come together in that spot of the voice where they want to be letting go. And it's just encouraging more of a mixed coordination, but you don't want to stay there forever because also it tends to hike the larynx a little bit, which we don't want forever. I think twang is great, but it doesn't have to be the end all be all. And sometimes people are like, so mixing is nasal, right? No, there's nothing nasal about this. It's still oral. But anyway, you know, that's a whole nother conversation. Bottom line is you use the tools in your toolbox with these sort of funny sounds, and then eventually you take them away so that, you know, the singer can find a more performance-ready sound.
You've got some really great courses on your vocal website, your EKM Vocal Studio. I've bought myself some of those courses. You've got stuff on warm-ups, classical singing, on these topics, belting and mix. So listeners, go and check them out. There's some exercises that you do there. What else might we expect from these courses of yours?
I founded EKM in 2019, right before the pandemic, and then I joined TikTok and things blew up and it grew really fast. And really, because I'm a performer as well, you know, I sort of go in and out of teaching full-time versus not, and performing full-time and then doing a little bit of both and whatever. So anyway, over the past, what has it been, 6-7 years, I knew I wanted to build a product, but it's just, that sort of thing takes so much time. It's well worth it. Any voice teachers listening, it's well worth it though. Do it. It's great. But anyway, so yeah, that's the one product we have so far, and I'm hoping to build more down the line. The EKM singing series, there's 7 different topics, and in each one you get basically like a vocal technique and vocal health lecture breakdown, and then you also get a breakdown of the exercises that we're going to do and sort of some common pitfalls and how to not fall into those and things to think about on each of the exercises, and then just like an audio track where you push play and you can go through it on your own in your car on the way to rehearsal or anywhere, really. I think sometimes singers don't know how to exercise and work out their voice beyond what they do in voice lessons. Sometimes people listen back to old voice lessons, but then there's talking and you have to fast forward. And anyway, it's just a nice 10 to 15 minute, like push play, you know, you're doing something really good for your voice, and in lots of different styles, which I feel like, God, I could have used that.
Yeah, for sure. And you've got some teachers, haven't you, that you have brought into your studio. So how's it all going at HQ? Any news?
Good. Yeah, no, good. Yeah, we have 8 teachers at EKM these days. I feel really lucky. They're all people I really, really admire, and they're all Institute for Vocal Advancement teachers, so all using the same techniques and terminology, and trained by me, but also trained by the Institute. So we all sort of speak a common language, which is nice. And I also just, I feel so grateful to have them because even just like personally, I think for a lot of people, voice teaching can be really one-sided. Like, you know, you're the only one doing it and you see your students, and if you have a student that really stumps you, you're kind of stuck. I love this community we have where we're our group text is like always going off with people sort of sending little recordings of, hey, I heard this in a voice lesson today from my singer and I wasn't sure what that's about. What are you guys hearing? What are you hearing? Let's talk about it. Oh yeah, I'm hearing, extrinsic tension. That's probably jaw tension, blah, blah, blah. We're constantly helping each other out.
You really do need that. Yeah, you do need that as a solo teacher for sure, just to geek out with people and to get other opinions.
And it's also great because it means that I am able to take 4 months off to go do a show, or, I have these teachers that I just like really love and respect that I can refer my students out when I need to. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of which, it's audition season. You're back auditioning. If you could play one role, what would you want to manifest? What are we putting out there into the ether?
I have a few. I really, maybe it's cringe, I don't know. I really, really want to play Jenna in Waitress. I've wanted to do it since I saw it. It's just one of those roles that, like, ever since I saw it, I was like, oh, that's it. That's what I want to do. That's my girl. So yeah, I really want to do Jenna. But there's also a bunch. I've been auditioning recently for a lot of new work, a lot of developing new characters, new story. So there's a lot in that world too that I'm excited about. And you never really know though what's gonna land in your lap. That's the funny thing about being an actor. Like, I feel like my extended relatives at Thanksgiving will be like, what do you want to do next? And it's like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I'll take it.
Whatever's meant to be is gonna fall in your lap, and you're gonna fall in love with it, and you're gonna find your version of whatever it is, and that's the joy of of being a performer.
And if you had to do one role that you've already done again, what would that be?
All of them. I love them all so much. But I actually, there are a few roles that I did in like high school and like even middle school that I want to do again now that I'm like a professional and all of that. I did Maureen in Rent as a 15-year-old with braces, and I would really like to do that now. Sort of rewrite that history a bit. Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to do that one.
And lastly, did you ever absolutely crap your pants as Elsa, thinking, is this dress gonna change when you do your big reveal?
Never once we opened, thankfully. It really went quite well once we opened, but during previews and certainly during tech, things were looking a little wonky. Like nobody quite knew if, yeah. We were working on it every single day during tech. Every day there was like at least an hour dedicated to just that dress and wrapping it out and changing the weight of, well, I don't want to tell you. You don't have to know all the things. But anyway, changing different techniques to get it off quick and to have the other one. Yeah, it took a lot of trial and error. But once we opened, we really had figured it out. So that was cool. I never got on stage feeling like, oh, I don't think it's going to work today.
Yeah, we don't need that. When we're letting it go, it's not what we need for the dress to fail.
No, and it happens, and that's okay. It's okay. It happens.
I'd find it so funny if that was me. I don't know if I'd be able to carry on, but professionalism and everything.
Yeah, you just have to, and you know what? I would rather it be that. Like, find it funny. It's okay. Theater is not that serious. The worst is when, something goes wrong on stage and it really gets them in a bad place and they're sad or angry, embarrassed or whatever. I think in general, over my years of doing this professionally, I've really come to a point where it is either not shocking or if it's shocking, it's funny. And it's better to be funny. If I have a voice crack on stage, I'm like, that's funny. I can't not laugh at it, or if I forget lyrics or things happen, it's live theater. And it's actually good to look at it through the lens of, let's laugh at that because it's all you can do.
Yeah, it does take the sting out.
And it's normal and it's okay.
Emily, where can we find out more about you? Hear your beautiful voice giving us these demos. Tell us, where's the best place?
Yeah, you can find me online. I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. My personal account is Emily Kristen Morris, and the studio's account is EKM Vocal Studio. And yeah, you can also find me through my website, emilykristenmorris.com. And that's also where our vocal studio lives. yeah, you can come take a lesson, come try a course. Yeah, there's more on the horizon. So if you're following me on one of those places, you'll be in the loop.
Brilliant. Oh, Emily, thank you so much. It's been great to spend some time, get to chat out a really gritty part of technique. So thank you so much. It's been a dream.
So fun, Alexa. Thanks for having me.